The three things that I have found to be the most important in achieving the effect of waves on water is perspective, which is, the way things look from where you're looking, but more importantly, the size that they should be according to where they are in the picture, and the angles of lines that would be like the top and the bottom of my big blue ocean wave. The second thing is the shape of my waves. So, different waves have different shapes, and it really pays to know what those shapes are and in the basic shape that all others are made of. And a lot of the time, we may not realize how sensitive our eyes are to the very tiny shapes that make up a texture. Like my shirt, you know that this is not denim because it has a particular texture that doesn't match up with the texture you're used to seeing on denim, but it's very tiny shapes that make that up. And color too, which is the third thing. The colors that I use that are going to define those shapes. So let me expand on those three things a little bit. When I started this big blue ocean wave and this picture that's behind me that I just finished, I was real careful to map out my perspective. And so I'm just going to touch on two things that I think are the most important about perspective, and that is that all parallel lines vanish to the same point. So if my wave is parallel to the ocean that it's rising from, then it needs to vanish. That long edge that makes up the base of my wave that I painted, it's going to go up to the horizon and vanish on the same horizon as that ocean. And then the top line that's going to be the height of my wave, I'm going to make parallel to that. And so it's going to also vanish to that same horizon. And you'll notice that on my big blue ocean wave, that vanishing point would be maybe just off of my canvas. It doesn't have to be in the picture, but you have to know as the artist whether the parallel lines that you are meaning to make parallel are actually going to meet at a point that's on the horizon or the same point as that ocean that is parallel to them. They all have to vanish to the same point if they're parallel. And so then I made another line to represent where the water meets the shore, and I made that also meet at the same point because it's parallel. It's going the same direction. Now, I totally scrambled it and mixed it up as I painted, but it was a great starting point to just give me reference of the sizes that things should be. And so in the big blue wave picture, I made one circular oval shape where the sea foam is rolling in. I made another one behind it, and I had a good reference of how big to make the oval that was further because I had that shoreline drawn. And so that helped my perspective to look accurate, and it really helps the picture in the end. The second rule of perspective is what I call the rule of halves and doubles. And so every time something doubles in distance, it becomes 1/2 of its size visually. And so when you have rocks or trees or things that are not in a perfect row that you can just draw your triangle lines to get the vanishing point, they're all scattered. Well, you can know that the closer they are to the horizon, the further away they are if it's something that's level like the ocean. And when they're twice as far, you know that they need to be half the size. So it's very easy for me to say that I have this rock, and so if I go halfway to my horizon, that is twice as far. Now you're thinking, wait, how do you know it's twice as far? Because here's another rule. Every time you cut the distance to the horizon in half on something that's flat like this, it is exactly twice the distance that it was before you cut it in half. So if this is 10, I cut it in half. I don't care if it's 10 miles, 10 meters, 10 feet. If I cut it in half right here, then it's going to be 20. It's going to be double that distance. Then if I take that 20, I cut the distance to the horizon in half. Well, now I'm at 40. And so I know that I need to, every time I go halfway to the horizon, if I'm doing a bunch of rocks or things that are similar in size, I know that I need to make it half the size every time I get halfway to that horizon. And I can use that if I put one here and then one way over here. It helps me to not have to think so hard about vanishing points. Just a general rule that can be helpful. it pays also to know the basic shape of things. And so here's something that I did different with these two oil paintings that I don't do so much with the water base. Because of the dry time, I painted the background first, and then I painted the faces of the waves on top of that background. So then that's where we start talking about the shape, because I'm painting a shape to represent the faces of all of those waves. I painted ovals. Now on this, they have a more pointed top because these waves are spiking up more. They're more intense waves because they're ripples that are crossing each other, and everywhere they cross, they make a high point. Now, you can see more about that in my How to Paint Ripples video, but you can also see that I mapped this out. I drew my lines, and then wherever they crossed, I had my high points. So my point is that these are more triangular shapes on the top, where on the big blue ocean wave, they're just gentle oval shapes that are more elongated, like more level water. So what I do is I always make the base of that shape, that one brush stroke that represents one little wave, I make the top of it slightly more arced than the bottom. You wouldn't think that that tiny little detail would make a difference in that large picture, but it does. I'm telling you that it does. Just the slight difference between the top and the bottom. The top always being the slightly more arced portion of it. I'm sure there are exceptions to that, but this is a general rule that has worked very well for my paintings. And then I fade that bottom edge of that face. I fade it downward. And then the top, maybe I don't fade it as much. And so that one has a more sudden change to the other color because it's the top of a wave arcing back, disappearing out of view, where the bottom of that face is swooping toward you and you see more of it. So I always have a more blended gradient on the underside of each of those shapes. So imagine an oval, then you arc the top of the oval a little more than the bottom of the oval, and then you blend the lower portion of the oval a little more than you blend the top. You wouldn't think so much thought could go into individual brush strokes, but it helps a lot. So I did that with each in that blue ocean wave painting. And then I blended the edges out also so that they started becoming interconnected with each other. And then the negative space that's left is my blue background. And then that happens to be the same kind of shapes that I would have painted with my water-based paint if I was doing it opposite, where I was doing that sky reflection color on top of the underwater color. Painting the faces is painting the underwater color on top of the reflection. So that basic shape helps a lot. And then understanding that that basic shape becomes twice as big when you get lower, when you get twice as far from the horizon, so that you have really good perspective. And as I made all of those individual strokes and blended them, I tilted them a little bit along my lines of perspective. Not all the way. I didn't make them completely parallel because the way waves work is, they're kind of a round object. They're not like a rectangle where they're going to have one parallel side. They're kind of round, but if they are somewhat of an oval shape, when you tilt it, you will have a little bit of angle change. So I just tilted them slightly along my lines of perspective to help enhance the perspective of my picture. And then when I got to doing the sea foam on top of those, I didn't tilt any of those lines, so that then I have a nice separation between the perspective of the sea foam that's in all of those kind of oval patterns, and then my little ripply waves going along my picture, kind of following a vanishing point. It helps separate the two layers. Now the color is very important. If I can encourage you to do one thing that I think would transform all of your pictures, it would be to memorize what colors of light do when they mix rather than colors of paint. So the red, green, blue model used in monitors is a good illustration of that. Maybe not exactly like the natural world, but very simple and helps you to understand. The most important thing to understand with mixing light is that when you mix yellow light with blue light, you do not get green. You will get a gray or white result. And so that will change your choice of colors when you're representing a blue sky reflecting on a somewhat yellowish surface. If I just mixed this color with my blue sky and just did a 50-50 to represent half of this color of light with half of this color of light, I would get a greenish result. I don't want that because that's what paint does. It's not what light does. So instead, I used black and white because I know that this plus a blue is going to make some kind of a gray. So I just used a straight black and white mix, and then as I got real close to the horizon, I did add some blue to the gray. But I was careful not to add any blue to this orange so I wouldn't get green, because you're not going to see green when the light mixes. I started by just making a continuous gradient that goes underwater color to reflection color at the horizon in both paintings. Think of it as, you know, the continuous surface that gets interrupted by the waves. So I start with that continuous surface, and that is a very defining nature of water, is that as you look straight through it, you don't see much reflection. You see what's in the water. But as you look along the surface, you see more reflection. So you always have that gradient. What's at your feet has more of the underwater color. What's far out has a lot more of the above the water objects that it's reflecting. And if it was a perfectly smooth surface, it would just be a mirror reflection. So a lot of the time I'll start my picture with that base, just painting the reflection upside down. I'll do it real roughly though. And then the waves interrupt that reflection. So then I'll put the faces of the waves across that picture, and then I'll make the gradients that represent that gradual curved transition from the face of the wave back to that original gradient. And then I'll fill in object reflections, objects that I want to put according to which angles on the wave are facing that object. So you can see with this painting that this wave is, the top of it is facing straight back, so it doesn't have any dark color on it. It's just facing this light colored sky, but then this angle that swoops down is facing these dark objects, so I put a little bit of dark color on there. This is the backside of a wave, and it's facing directly toward this, so I put the reflection of this on it. And then all of these waves I did likewise. This angle is facing these dark objects, so of course it's not exactly accurate, but it's enough to create that look and give you the perception. Okay, now let's talk about the underwater color. In my big blue wave, I used all that green where it's filtering the light. So that's an important thing with the underwater color, is that gradient that goes from the thicker, deeper water being bluer and then getting lighter as it gets greener, or I should say getting greener as it gets lighter. So think of it in this way, that if you have a blue substance, it's going to, at the thinnest parts of that substance, it's going to filter out the red light before it filters out the green light. So you have this big blue transparent substance, and it's in front of the sunlight blocking it out. Where it's thick, it's blocking both the red light and the green light, which is just our RGB representation of all of the colors of light that are out there. And so it filters out both of those at the thick points, but where it's thinner, it's only filtering out the red, so you get the greenish blue. So if you think of it in that way, then you understand more what you're painting. Where it's thinner, green light is still getting through while the red light is getting filtered out. And so then the other effect that I have in that giant wave is that what I just learned on my Facebook page, if you follow me on Facebook, I asked what is that effect called, where the light gets, you know, concentrated into those little squiggly stripes? Caustics. So I didn't know that. So thank you for everybody that posted that answer. That was an educational moment for me. And so that's the effect of the light hitting those angles of the wave and getting concentrated into that bright stripe that's at the base. And so that's why I have that bright green color near the base of that wave. And then across the whole surface of my water, I put the tiny little bright lines somewhere near the base of each of those little ripples. Yeah, I mean, I just did enough for the effect. I tried not to go too crazy with the detail. So hopefully those things will help you with your understanding of painting waves. And I am going to work on making a much more easy to follow tutorial that walks you through step by step a simple picture of a wave. I don't want to use this big complicated picture because I want to really break this down so that you can know that it makes sense and have the success of painting a simple picture. So stay in touch, and I'm going to be hurrying to get a good how-to video out that is painting a complete oil painting of an ocean wave, just like that big fancy one that I just finished. Hey, listen, thank you for watching my videos. I appreciate it very much, and it's always a tremendous pleasure for me to share this, passion for in my life that I've researched so much. It's such a joy for me to share my discoveries and then listen to what you have to say about them. So I hope you continue to follow, and I'll see you next time.